Hey, my peeps. It is the Gooseman coming back at you early in the morning with Richard Martin and I to get a little channel update and discussion going on anything and everything. And we've already started it off with the controversy of sugar as a drug. And in the background, I'm having my buddy Elver King's finish of, well, he's just started Berlin. And I'm curious as to, I think he has the Fuhrer bunker destroyed. And I thought that was an automatic loss, but maybe he set it up different. So I'm just going to have that playing in the background as Richard Martin and I discuss anything and everything. So you were saying about the if if all of a sudden all the world's sugar was taken away, you posit the idea that the world would be in mass chaos from withdrawal symptoms, correct?
Yep. Yeah, I think people would be violent
Mm.
and there would be a ton of crime. I think there'd be property damage. I think there would be theft. I think people would be hitting each other.
Because they couldn't
You know,
handle that.
yeah, I think a sudden withdrawal, I mean, it's the most powerful drug in the world. It would be total chaos. It would probably be like that for about a week and then people would settle down. It takes a little bit to get the sugar out of your system.
I'll bet. I'll bet. I can't imagine. I greatly reduced the amount of sugar that I've eaten. Of course, um, that's that's the main source of the weight loss that I've has happened with me.
Hmm.
Is I you can increase your exercise all you want, but if you're not willing to make a dietary change, there's going to be really no result.
So So 90% of weight loss is through diet, not exercise.
Right.
There's a
I
fun
totally agree with
fact,
that.
and it's funny because the weight loss industry exploits people's ignorance on this. It's a multi-billion dollar industry about weight loss, and they cover up the fact that it's diet that drives it, not how many miles you run, not how many weights you lift, because people want easy solutions
Right.
without sacrificing anything.
What do you mean by
And
that?
that's a psychological.
Sacrificing anything?
Do you think people, when they talk about weight loss, want to actually give up all the food they like?
No, no. In fact, I work out with my mom, and she is very very overweight. Not to slander her or anything, but she has a great obesity problem and has had for many years, decades now. Um, and I talked to her about, she's doing this exercising now, and it's not really changing her weight. And I talked to
Hmm.
her um, about food being the primary source of the weight loss that you could see, and it's like it glides right over her. It's like in one ear out the other. It's just something that she doesn't want to compute,
It
doesn't want to.
it's because
It's an addiction.
yes, I mean literally, it's like when you talk to a drug addict, you're never going to get through to them until they get through to themselves.
Right. Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
think people don't realize that we're literally surrounded by drug addicts everywhere, but it's not what you think. We have a
Right.
much bigger issue with sugar as a drug addiction than any other drug in the world by a lot. Sugar leads to more death than anything. It leads to like everything, hypertension, increased cancers. Most of the food that we eat is actually killing us, but sugar is the driver behind obesity and diabetes and because so what's going on there is companies are exploiting an evolutionary biological phenomena with humans where if we found a sugar source, which back in the day was fruit, we would crave it and eat it and that would be an excellent source of fuel and energy. Because when we were primates, basically, food was less reliable. Humans evolved before the agricultural revolution. So, um, our food, we would eat anything. This is why we're omnivores. Like, we would scrap together whatever we could find. And sugar was awesome because it was a ton of calories and it was easy to store. And then we would burn that sugar later. The other thing is we were eating fruit as our primary source of sugar. And the thing about fruit is it's loaded with vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and fiber. So it's very, very difficult to actually overeat fruit. Like it's basically impossible to overeat fruit because there's too much fiber. Eventually you'll get full. Whereas if you're drinking soda or things loaded with sugar, it's harder. So
Right.
companies know this, by the way. They know our brains are hardwired to literally light up like we're on cocaine when we get sugar in front of us. So they just load sugar into almost every product. There's sugar that is in all kinds of things that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they have rewired our brains to experience pleasure with the food that we're eating. And it makes us addicted and we don't know how to stop.
Yeah, I don't doubt
And
that.
we make all kinds of excuses as to why we can't stop.
Can't stop, won't stop.
And it's not entirely people's fault because that is an evolutionary response to the environment that we live in. If the environment we live in is literally overloaded with fat and sugar, then we are going to eat it. I mean, it's literally like trying to reprogram us not to feel threatened if a wild animal is in front of us. Like we can't rewire the hard code that is in our genome sequence. This is something that I think is going to just blow your audience away. We can't just stop those cravings.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's natural. I still crave, sugary things. The only thing you can do is intellectually recognize that you're being played and that you need to stop and just eat something like fruit. So, fruit is a major part of my diet, and it helps with the sugar cravings. Because basically, once you're a drug addict, you're always a drug addict. So you're always going to be in a battle to fight your natural biological urges.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to the whole evolutionary stuff, but I think you know that.
It doesn't matter if you do. It's just like it's just a fact of what humans are built for. Like it's the reason why we're wary of strangers as well. Like that's a trait that comes back from millions of years ago because we didn't know like if there was hostile intent with people of our species. Like
With
there's a lot of things about humans that you can I guess you could question like if this stuff is true, but I think a lot of this stuff is probably verifiable by people that study evolutionary biology, and you can look at our genome sequence and probably isolate some genes that indicate aggression and so on. But even if you don't believe in any of that, we do have like the biochemistry behind how our body works, which we're starting to finally figure out. Like, why do we store sugar so easily? Why do we store fat so easily? How do we break it down? And things like that. That's true.
well, I think one of
But,
the other
Goose, you can admit that since you don't eat sugar so much, you feel better, right?
absolutely well the loss of weight and the overwhelming exercise that I do is greatly improved my overall health.
What you'll find is if you go to the doctor and do some blood work, all your numbers will be better,
Mm.
probably. So even if you don't believe in the evolutionary biology stuff, you believe in results, right?
Good point.
that so that's the big takeaway. If people listening to this are having issues with weight or It doesn't even matter, mental illness, hypertension, cardiovascular. You should eat a lot more greens and a lot more fruit, um, and it will. You'll be surprised. It takes a while, but you'll feel better.
Yeah, you got to stay consistent with it.
And it's the biggest middle finger you can give to society is to do that, because practically half of our GDP is built on feeding us bad food that we pay for, then we pay to get diagnosed with an illness, and then we pay to take drugs to fix the symptoms of the illness, not the underlying conditions.
Okay, okay. So let's go there. Let's talk about this because this is something that I don't understand. What what the hell? What the hell happened to? I had critical thinking and just overall common sense when it comes to the way people operate. It's like we've come under a mass psychosis these past 2 years when it comes to everything. For
I
example,
hate to break it to you, Goose. It goes back to the 1920s. You have to watch this documentary called Century of the Self. It'll shatter you.
well,
You'll
well, let's
start
focus
to
on the here
connect
and now.
things.
What I'm talking about is the
Yeah.
is the right now with the okay. So you're the Democratic or the Democratic Party persuasion. You voted for Biden this last election, and you would consider yourself a Democrat for I don't know, probably decades now, or at least years, right?
So I think my first vote was Obama in 2008.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
So
Okay, Obama since 2008. And uh, what I don't understand, what makes me scratch my head is that everybody was kind of like anti-vaccination when Trump was in office, but as soon as that switch was made, it's like everybody said, "Oh, great, let's trust the drug companies." I mean, like you guys hate big companies, but all of a sudden you love
uh,
the big drug
okay, see,
pharma.
see, Goose, man, you are hitting into some very deep stuff. Very, very deep stuff. You can't even just look at it in the past couple of years. I don't. You remember the Wakefield incident with vaccines?
No,
The
I'm.
researcher who's like vaccines cause autism.
Mm-mm.
So I think that was in the late 90s or early 2000s. There's this report that came out. He's like, "Oh my God, vaccines cause autism," and it made all the waves, and it started a huge liberal, some conservative parents push to be against vaccines. And I posit that this was planned. So this research that he did was totally bogus. Like it was not professionally done. It wasn't a true like random sample of kids or whatever. Like this research was very poorly done. The media runs with this initially. Oh my God, vaccines cause autism. And then the pushback happened. And the pushback ends up targeting the small anti vaccine segment that existed in the United States. And it pushed all the way through the 2000s and the 2010s. And I posit that this was a carefully collaborated plan just for this specific scenario you're talking about, to make sure that if you don't take the vaccine that the government tells you to take, that you're an anti-vaxxer, that you're a conspiracy nut. And the setup for this goes back to the food that we're eating, but we'll ignore that for now. But we are very vulnerable to, I guess, with that phrase mass psychosis formation, because our brains, I have said this before, but we are not as intelligent as we used to be, and it is not our fault. They have done studies, and there's microplastics in our brain and in our bloodstream, and almost certainly this is causing deterioration mentally, and it's causing a loss in fertility. I don't know if you've heard about this.
Mm-hmm.
There's no human on the planet, no living organism, no water source on the planet that doesn't have microplastics in it. And in case the audience doesn't know, the human body is not designed to have microplastics. And it can cross the cellular membrane and enter our bloodstream, our brains are not designed to have microplastics attached to them.
Are you talking like the
So
dark water stuff? The
no, no, you know how plastic degrade, like plastic can't degrade, but it can break apart.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, it eventually breaks apart into nano size, and it gets into our food, and it gets into our water sources, and we consume it, and then it gets in our digestive tract, and it crosses the intestinal lining to enter our bloodstream, and eventually it settles in every organ in our body. And we don't even know the full consequences of this, but we believe there's a link between increased Alzheimer's and dementia, among increased rates of cancer. Like there's a very high probability that the increase in illness and diagnosis that's happening is tied to not just the food that we're eating, but the microplastics in our body. Think about how crazy that is. So I'm going to make an argument that the reason it seems like people can't reason anymore is biologically we're losing the ability to do this. It's almost like a Brave New World situation where I believe either by accident or on purpose they are raising us as livestock. Like we're genetic experiments, and they need a physically capable but dumb workforce, like in Brave New World.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's happened. Like we're seeing that transition happen. Notice that uber rich people are eating whole foods all the time. That they make sure that they don't shop at the same supermarkets we do. Most of they don't eat processed food. Tom Brady, if you see Tom Brady, what he's eating, he basically eats a whole food plant based diet, and he's playing football at like 46.
Mm.
So he got it from his wife, who basically is a supermodel, and she had to eat very healthy to be a supermodel. But rich people do not live this, like the uber rich. They don't live the same life that we do. They know something that we don't. The food that they eat is not the same. Their kids don't live in neighborhoods that's exposed to lead poisoning and other things. Like most of our audience doesn't realize that there's a big train, and at the very front of the train is the uber rich people, and at the back of the train is everybody else, and they feed us scraps, and they feed us poisoned food, and we fight amongst ourselves, and we're just supposed to be happy with our place in life. And they've carefully programmed all of our entertainment and our politics and our socialization to make sure that we are not paying attention to the big picture. So you're focused on why is everyone so anti-vaccine, and like, why do we have so
No,
much hate
no,
about
no, no.
stupid
That
stuff?
no, no, no. Not that they're anti-vaccine. No, you misheard me.
Oh, the pro-vaccine.
Yeah, like what the
Yep.
hell?
It's programming. There's we have been set up. If you People follow the Wakefield incident automatically assume through association, if you don't like a particular vaccine, you're one of those nutters that thinks vaccines cause autism, and so on.
Okay, yeah.
It's diabolical. I mean, the people we're talking about here have been probably planning this for 100 years. That this is a systematic eradication of free will and the capacity to think independently. You ever wonder why when you vote for a politician, they always seem to sell out in some capacity?
Well, I was
It's all
assumed.
WWE. So all of our politics is WWE.
Right.
It's pre-written. They have the drama played out. They do whatever they can to convince you that who you're supporting and voting for actually represents your values, and then they'll find some excuse not to do whatever it is that you voted for them to do.
Right. If we
It's
just had um, four more seats, then we could get the judges we need in order to, because that's the government that we founded our nation on, was that if we just you know we founded it on a whim. That's our government. What? No, we founded on a.
Well,
We've
you're just being played though. Like I know Goose is really into his politics, but he doesn't realize that that is a time sink, and it's good for the people in power that he's focused on who he's voting for and who represents his values, because ultimately they will be bought in some capacity. And so that's the beautiful thing about the world we live in, is it's all a distraction. We're in front of our computers, we're getting entertained by our TV, we go to the movie theaters, we eat at restaurants, we do we do some sort of social activity with an organization, and it's all designed to specifically prevent us from achieving independence and spending time in nature. So the more time we spend with technology, the more that's less time where we can do self-actualization. It's less time where we can see the world for the way it really is. It's and because of the dopamine hits that we get from the interaction with technology, we don't know how to stop. It's a brave new world. I mean, this is the thing that will shock your audience. We are in the brave new world. That's what's so we don't realize it, and we probably have been in the brave new world for a very long time, before Goose's time. I mean, think about how diabolical that is. We have a book that tells us that this is a possible future, and they found a way to hide the fact that we are in that future.
Well,
There's a
the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was to make people believe that he doesn't exist.
well, I mean, that's your religious beliefs there. But yes, I could see the analogy. Is people think that their choices matter. They think who they vote for matters. Our society is already split in a substantive way. Like, you have people who are mentally and physically deteriorating by the day from the kind of work that they do and the environments they're exposed to, and you have the uber rich who make sure they're never exposed to these toxic chemicals. They make sure that the food that they eat is cleaned of all of this stuff that's getting in our soil. And you have, I guess, you kind of have people like me that are in that kind of do more sophisticated work. And to keep me placated, they give me enough money so that I can buy things that entertain me, like in Brave New World.
Right, the Soma holiday.
That's right. I think it's 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 just like it's kind of earth shattering when you realize that you have been played so badly. We're getting distracted. It's all part of a game. So this whole Russia Ukraine is a part of the same game.
It is
The you know
exactly like the COVID-19 thing. The
Yep,
exact same people who, had a George Floyd icon on their Twitter feed or whatever, were the same people that had a get vaccinated and mask icon on there, and then they just
yep.
switched it to the Ukraine flag. Hopefully, they put the flag correct with the, yellow bean on top.
But the point is that that's a step. So there's a big long chain of events that lead to this point, and there's more coming. We're not quite Brave New World, because the fact that we can even have this conversation means we're not there. But they have begun the transition.
Mhm.
Like, and we're probably going to see some 1984 stuff get blended in there. But the point is that people have been played. So I think the reason the Russian Ukraine thing is happening is they want to distract from COVID news. I mean, essentially, COVID is over, and there's vaccine issues popping up. I mean, we've talked about this. Like, people are mysteriously dying. Have you seen these reports? Like, professional athletes are suddenly dying of heart attacks.
Oh yeah, I've
Like,
known
I
about this
mean,
since the beginning.
everywhere, every sector.
Hmm.
It's unprecedented.
I know.
These are athletes who work out, they eat healthy, and they're suddenly dying of heart attacks.
Right, right. Maybe
We
there's
can't talk
something
about that, though.
wrong with exactly.
You know, we're not gonna. We're finally admitting that there's a myocarditis issue with the vaccines, right? But it gets
Mhm.
buried under Ukraine Russia news. So it's all part of the same. Like, I can give you another example. Biden keeps dangling student loan forgiveness in front of people, right? So that's just to keep them distracted and riled up, and not focused on other things.
It's
It's
got to keep them. Got to
you know
keep
once
those
you
voters voting for the Democrats, right? Gotta
And
have
it's just like,
the
the
reparations
GOP
and all
does the
this
same
stuff.
thing.
Oh, absolutely.
They're going to be like, whatever you're into. Oh, we're going to ban abortion,
Right, right. We're just one vote away.
or
We're
just
always
keep
just
voting
one
for
vote
us.
away.
We'll
Yeah,
do this thing and this thing. You're being played too.
I know.
It's
It's
it's hard it's hard to let go because you want to believe that you can make a difference. And I'm going to tell you something else that's going to blow your brains out is that organized religion is a part of the system too. It has been co-opted to manipulate people as well. So I remember I told you, like, religion, you got to be careful with it because I think there's a role for it, but it cannot be organized because when you hit an organization with anything, it will be used by the system to control you. So the best thing people can do is study religion on their own. It's very important to separate the authority that comes from perceived religious figures from your own authority.
well,
Now
see,
that's a very controversial take.
no, no. See, here's the deal with your concept of organized religion. The the idea is that um, if you look at the history of 1920s, 1930s Germany, you will see that the idea of the Führer principle came from the churches, and and the same kind of thing is happening in American churches today, where there is focus on the leader rather than focus on the Word of God. So when you're saying organized religion, what what you're really saying is the understanding of leader principle that is rooted in dictators, fascism. So I'm part of the Lutheran faith, and our focus is on Scripture. What does Scripture say about that? So our leadership is supposed to be centered on Scripture and what it says, and that's where we get our theology from, not from a man, not from a hierarchy, but from the Word of God.
In theory, but I guarantee you that as the scale of your organization increases, their corruption increases with it through some fashion, either through political propaganda or through social pressure. Judaism doesn't have these issues as much because there is no central authority figure. Um, there's not even a central, like, equivalent of a church. But still, I would argue that Judaism is been corrupted by politics because we have a lot of influence in DC, and this does filter down to the synagogue level. Especially on things relating to Israel and so forth. And so I would argue it's more important that you discover religious principles on your own or in very, very small groups to minimize the impact that society has on the inferences that you make. Because you think that your small church is immune to whatever is happening on a global scale, but you would be wrong. That's one of the most diabolical things about the system that we live in is it's infiltrated every aspect of your life. And the only way you can actually escape it is if you had a homestead, like way out away from everything, and you had no internet connection and you never went into town. Because all of these conniving ideas, they infiltrate. uh, Somehow it will eventually end up downstream. You're a little more insulated because you're in a small town, um, but because you have internet, because you have social media, because you care about politics, you've been corrupted as well. it's you can't escape the influence as much as you try. So that's my criticism about any kind of organized religious setup is it will be used to manipulate people. And I do think you're right that a lot of Christian sects have really hyper focused on centralization of power. in the religious leader of the church, and that is a setup to get you to accept a dictator. I think that's a part of a greater plan. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that we're quickly heading in that direction.
We're
So,
already there.
you know, liberals essentially think that, the people that run these federal departments are all powerful and they get to decide the rules and laws and regulations instead of Congress. And I think a lot of conservatives believe in religious leadership. And I think this will set them up for whoever they support as president. Oh, he can do whatever he wants, because we believe in strong central authority figures. I think both sides are being played on this. And we're seeing, Biden do some pretty ridiculous things. I mean, Trump also did some ridiculous things, but it seems like since George Bush, I mean, you could argue back to Eisenhower, but since George Bush especially, there's been an escalation in presidential power.
Right.
Um, and I think it's getting worse. And I think the next president will be even worse than Biden.
Well, we often the history um, appears to be that we elect a really bad Republican so that we can elect a even worse Democrat.
Like Nixon and then Carter. Carter wasn't. He had some good ideas. He just was, he had an international policy problem.
Well,
Carter
we're going to
wasn't so
disagree
bad.
about that, but um, let's change the focus a little bit because I actually wanted to talk about the game too. Um,
Yes.
so, what are your opinions of some of my playthroughs, my different campaigns that I'm doing? Which ones are you enjoying? Which ones are you less interested in?
I haven't seen all of them. I watched Ultimate Pack and I watched Africa Core and the
Which one, the
Grand Camp.
Locarnus one, the one that I just started, or the Italy core?
The not Italy Core. I
Okay,
haven't looked at Italy Core. And then I watched the GTPG one.
okay.
Uh,
That one I'm changing up because I feel it's way too easy right now. I'm
so so my so my thoughts are I love the pack mod. I wish that it was applied to the Grand Campaign. Like they could make the maps a little bigger in the Grand Campaign, and you could limit like the number of units more easily. The pack mod is just so massive. I can hear you getting really tired by the end.
it just gets
Um,
it's just
I
too
I think
much.
that you are not forced to think on those maps. That's the problem.
Right. And like
That's
people want me
why.
to talk about my strategy. It's as simple as I move, I shoot. That's it
So
doesn't feel
so
too
I think
difficult.
I think what's happened is I've ruined you because if you play on ultimate mode, that is super picky. Like,
Right.
even Goose's recklessness is pulled back.
Right.
He's forced to think strategically and cleverly. And what's happening is you're playing on all these other mods. I think they're too easy for you. You're
Some of
used
them,
to.
the if you really want to watch me pushed to my limit of strategically, you should also see the Battlefield Europe and the other Maguba mod, the Hungarian core, the ones that I do on the weekend. Those Maguba has a real art with his scenario and campaign creation. The Hungarian mod is so interesting because you're left with these less than stellar units to work with, and you have to make it work. You have to make it work, and it's so hard. It's so much fun. I'm enjoying that immensely. I just wish um, more people knew about it and gave him more credit than he currently gets.
Doesn't he get a ton of credit? How many mods has he made?
No, he's only made the Battlefield Europe, and most people focus on that. But I'm talking about the Hungarian
Oh.
core. That Tehran campaign is just a thing of beauty. absolute thing
I'll
of
have to
beauty.
check it out. I haven't. You have posted so many videos on different
Right.
things. I'm a busy man these days. It's hard
Yeah.
to keep up. I honestly still enjoy your ultimate mode, but I think I like seeing you suffer. But I think the issue is you don't have the time to properly play test. So some of those spectacular things I've done in ultimate mode is because I am spending hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours experimenting
Right.
to understand the nuance, and the nuances are just ridiculous. So you don't have that time, so you're kind of just stuck poking around sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and the maps are too challenging for that to just like poke around and act like it'll be okay. um, and so you have to reload all the time, and I think that's
Right.
what your frustration
Yes.
is you have to reload too much.
That's it exactly. I get frustrated with all the, okay, that round or that um, singular battle didn't go my way. I have to reload because I got a lousy hero.
Yep.
I got to reload because I didn't force the surrender and I need it to surrender. Stuff like that just got old.
And I also think it's getting really hard.
Yeah.
I don't know.
44 is
I
the
don't know if you
hardest.
have enough prestige. Like it's going to get pretty brutal. Like, even Soren on Mancine is like, yeah, 44. 44 is nasty business.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
it's I do enjoy that one, and then the GTPG is interesting, but not what I was expecting.
In what way?
I'm not. Uh,
Not what you're
I
expecting
guess
in
it
what way?
just seems faint compared to the Grand Campaign. Like a lot of these attempt to do the whole campaign that are shorter. It feels like a certain spirit lacks from them. Like
Interesting.
the Grand Campaign feels right.
Feels
There's something
right.
about it that
Yeah.
it
There's
feels
something
right. It
special.
feels like the right. Yeah, it's the right distance. Maybe the maps could be a bit bigger, but it's got the right tactics and strategy, um, and it's just very interesting. I don't mind coming back to it over and over again. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of these maps that you play doesn't have that feeling for me.
Mm.
And in fact, I think you're destroying them, right? Like you fairly easily on most of these mods are able to win, playing quite recklessly, I might add. Um,
Well, the
so
the pack mod
uh,
especially because, like I said, I just move and shoot. I have so many units. I have so much time. It's not a challenge, and it's
I
just
think that the
the
pack mod needs
greatest.
to tighten the turn.
Yeah, and the
I
greatest
think
thing I
like
enjoy about the pack mod is all the pop-ups. I like all the history
hmm
in it. Yeah.
could they just do that to the grand campaign?
Well, I think they are. They're working on it, or at least one of the uh, people on the forum is talking about working on it. I think he's in the 42, 43 part of it, but I don't think he's making them really insane maps. Linus is talking about doing that to the maps, like making them more of a challenge. You've,
Yeah,
yeah.
because I just love the units and I love all the mobility. Those Panzer ones and Panzer twos can multi move. And they kind
Oh,
of
in
are
the
like
in the
recon units effectively
in
in the
the
pack mod.
GTPG thing.
Or is that GDPG? Yeah, I love that. I
I
think
do too.
it's the Panzer twos become scouts later, right?
Right, right. So I
And
I'm
that makes those
enjoying.
tanks super
I just need
useful.
it to be more challenging. So what I'm doing, uh, I'm planning on doing Spain. I'm gonna have to go here pretty quick because Pearl is getting fussy. God dang it! I try to make this work, but what was I gonna say? Oh, so with GTPG, I'm about to do Spain here, probably this weekend, and what I plan on doing is before I start, or before I like, you can change the difficulty mode at the end of a scenario. Did you know that? Because I just found that out.
You, is that true?
Yes,
Is that for anything?
yes.
Ah,
So like you're playing,
okay.
let's say you're playing the grand campaign, and then you realize that on the sixth scenario of Grand Campaign 39 that you want to change the difficulty, you just at the end of that sixth scenario, you save the game, and that that screen that says view battlefield or save replay. There's a button that
Mm-hmm.
says difficulty, and you can click on that and change the difficulty level for the next or for going forward. I didn't know that either.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, there you go.
Right, right. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change it from not just Field Marshal but also Rommel, and then I'm at the start of the campaign. I'm going to manually remove 10,000 prestige, just to make
Okay.
it more interesting for me, more painful, because I'm a masochist.
Yeah, I think your biggest areas of improvement is you don't think enough on the maps and you don't do a reevaluation on your strategy.
What do you mean?
Like I think you're just full steam ahead.
Right.
Like your default mode is, but you don't do this in ultimate mode. See, this is what I love about your ultimate mode is you really do have to think it through carefully, at least
Exactly.
initially.
Especially the first 2 3 days. Yeah.
Because you got to get a feel for it, and I think it makes your head hurt, which is a good sign. So I think you're used to just you're goose, you just plow through everything. Um, but in ultimate mode, you just can't do that ever.
No. No. I think
So I think
you should watch the three-parter of the Hungarian mod. I forget what it's called. Hold on, let me just look it up. One thing for sure, I have to get batteries for my stupid mouse. It's been pissing me off. I don't know if you do. You use a wireless mouse?
I have a wired mouse that doesn't need a battery
Yeah, I
because it
should.
plugs into the PC.
I used to be doing that too, but it's the no, that's the 10th, the ninth scenario. So had to split it up into a three-parter, and it is a killer. And Alexievka, the first part is dealing with just the first 6 days, and you can't use your core units. You have to just use the auxiliary units, and then the next 6 days you have to try and decide where you're going to send your core army and any other auxiliary units, which areas you're going to try to defend, and then the last 6 days, I I've never seen this in a scenario before. It actually got harder on the very last 6 days.
Oh,
Yeah, it's like he sent his
yeah.
big dog units in at that time, and it was devastating. It was awesome. So I highly recommend watching the Alex. If you want to see me push to my limits, that would be the one to watch. The Royal Hungarian Army Turan campaign Alexievka. Uh,
So yeah, you got to entertain this goose. If you're just plowing through everything, then
I move, I
I
shoot. I
mean,
move, I
we're
shoot.
I'm here for the suffering. So
You will see suffering on that
so that
campaign.
Africa core, by the way, is there a way? I think it's too easy for you.
That's
The
what
one,
the creator is talking about, and I'm not. He wants me to kind of start over, but I'm because he's making some tweaks based on my feedback to it. But
could you cut your experience gains then? Like in between the next end of next scenario, like just cut your make the field marshal effect double.
ugh, God, what are you trying to do to
I
me?
don't, cause, well, I don't know. I feel like you're having too easy a time with it.
Well, it's supposed to. It's the first few scenarios. Well, Raza al Madur was not easy,
Yeah, that was brutal.
and
Yeah, that was
reconnaissance
brutal.
and force was not easy, but brevity and battle axe are meant to be easy. Uh,
Oh, okay. So maybe it's the fifth scenario you'll start to suffer.
yeah, dash to the wire. We'll see because he's making tweaks to it, and I have to wait to see what those tweaks are before I can play the next scenario. But I'm going to make a lot of decisions after that. I gotta go.
Yep.
Okay.
See you later.
Bye. And as always, stay Lutheran, my friends. Thanks for watching.